Hey everyone, I'm Amethyst, and I participated in another Brackeys Game Jam, this time in a team. Participating in a team has been my goal since the last Brackeys Game Jam. This was something I had never done before, so I was quite nervous, but it all turned out very well. So, let's get started. Before the jam. About a month before the Game Jam started, I began searching for a teammate. Since I'm a bit of a generalist, there wasn't really anyone in particular that I was looking for, so I wanted to do a little bit of everything. I eventually found a programmer called Atsh who had lots of experience in that field. Not long after, we found another teammate to serve as our composer and sound effect designer, called Pete. As we drew closer to the jam start date, I began to feel anxious. We had agreed to make a story-driven game, and since I would be the writer, it was kind of up to me to come up with a compelling story to go along with whatever theme was chosen. If you've watched my previous Game Jam videos, you'll know I struggle a bit with coming up with a plot. I didn't want to let my teammates down, but I wasn't sure if there was anything to do to prepare. Then the theme voting started. From that, I got a list of 8 possible themes, so I decided to come up with a small idea for each. And so I did exactly that. I was quite proud that I was able to do it, especially since a few of the themes were a bit difficult. After some discussion with Atsh, I decided to take a backseat on the coding and focus on making the art and story the best that I could. I do like coding most of the time, but doing so in a jam environment is very stressful, especially since I still have a lot to learn. Day 1. We received the theme Strange Places at 6 a.m. sharp. To be honest, I was a little disappointed at first. I didn't exactly love any of the theme options, but I was hoping we'd get something like a best friend or link up. I was just glad that the theme didn't end up being maps. Anything was better than maps. The idea I had for the Strange Places theme was this: liminal space. The player is in a dream that represents their death and is a way for them to accept that they have died. They don't remember how they died and have to traverse the liminal spaces to remember again. Died while trying to escape a burning house after saving someone from the fire. Spoiler alert, the main character does not end up dying after saving someone from a fire. I honestly completely forgot about that part, and I'm glad I did, because I like what I came up with better. We all discussed this idea I had written down and decided on a slightly different version, leaning more towards the dreamlike than the liminal. I really like liminal spaces, but it didn't end up working as well with the story I wanted to tell. And with that, I began ideation. I used the same strategy that I used for my last Game Jam, and focused on the characters first. I began with the main character, who I named Bella. I created a mood board for her so I could get a good, general idea of what she should look and act like. She didn't actually end up looking like this in the end, but I like what I ended up with better. I have too many dead, edgy, life-hating OCs as it is. I did keep the idea of her having flowers in her hair though. Afterward, I did a lot of research on some spoiler-related things and began developing Bella's backstory. Basically, just her personality, what she was like in life, and how she died. I could use this information as inspiration for all the other characters and the sequence of events that would occur in the game. After all, everything was going to be based on her. As I continued creating my mood boards, Pete suggested that we loosely place the game in a post-Victorian age, as some of my ideas so far reminded him of that time period. He suggested that we could loosely base the character designs and the music off of that, and I agreed. Next was the mood board for the other 3 major characters in the game, each one representing a different aspect of Bella in her life. I won't go into specifics, but maybe you can figure it out. I created mood boards for 3 monsters: a masked monster, an eye monster, and a death monster. Day 1 of a game jam is always the most important for me, as it determines what the rest of the jam is going to be like. So, without delay, I set to work on designing the plot and sequence of events. It doesn't look like much, but it took all day and was quite exhausting. I did a lot of the ideation for this, but my teammates also helped me a lot, especially with coming up with puzzles for each section. I think part of the difficulty for this was the theme Strange Places. I wanted to really emphasize the strangeness, so every single part of the game needed to be different. As the artist, it was my job to design just that. So each section had an additional mood board that I used as inspiration for how each place should look. With the help of my teammates and my brothers, I managed to get the majority of it done by the end of the day. Also, in between plotting sessions, I finished designing Bella. I began with 3 design sketches that I didn't really like. I sent them to my teammates who liked the third one best, but I was still unsatisfied. So I tried a few more times before landing on one I liked and finishing it off. I tried to draw from post-Victorian female clothing that would be worn by upper-class women. It's not completely historically accurate, but that's okay. And then I made her sprite sheet and began on the tile set for the first section. This part of the game is quite small, so I didn't need to do a lot of work for it. I basically made everything except for some furniture and the sky background. Then I implemented it all into the game. And finally, I created a to-do list for all the art-related things I would need to complete before the end of the game jam. It was a lot, maybe a bit too much, but I did manage to get about 95% of it done by the end of the game jam. Day 2. After finishing the intro tile set, I talked with Atsh about different parts of the game. There were some bits that were a bit vague and lacking mechanics-wise, so we brainstormed to come up with puzzles and mechanics that would fit well with the story and be engaging. Luckily, we were able to figure out most everything else. I'm quite glad that Atsh was there, as I don't think I could have coded a lot of those things myself, not with how extensive the game was. I uploaded everything I had into Godot and began working on the tile map for the intro section. Despite it being a small room, it took a while as I made a lot of changes and additions to the base art as I was designing it. You can't really know what looks good together and what exactly you need until you place everything together. The last thing I did for the intro section on day 2 was add in all the dialogue, and that took ages. Not because there was a lot of dialogue, but because the player could interact with the objects in the room in countless different orders. I had to make sure the correct dialogue played at the correct time, and that took a while to figure out. Once I was done with that, I set about working on the next area, the mask section. This was when I designed this beautiful man right here. I had a lot of fun drawing him. Actually, I had a lot of fun drawing all the characters, but I was really excited about the ideas I had for him. I referred to his mood board, where a big inspiration was this image, the one that has multiple faces or masks. So when I drew the masked man's face, I kept this in mind. The most difficult part of drawing him was the 3 faces in 3 different angles. It was challenging but fun. I also gave him horns because, well, otherwise I'd have to make him bald or give him hair, and I didn't really like either options. For his clothes, I also took inspiration from post-Victorian male fashion. For the colors, I chose purple and gold because they are very regal and rich colors. Also, it fits with the overall theme of purple. I'd planned to make the masked man a very uptight, posh guy, who sees himself as better than everyone else and is weirdly delighted in the gruesome and horrible. So purple and gold felt fitting. And then I made his sprite. Only one direction because that was the only direction we needed for the game. The rest of the day was spent working on the tile set for the masked man section. Before I finished off for the day, Pete let me know that he had added footsteps and temporary music to the game. Also, on that note, Pete made an initial piano sketch for Bella's theme. Here's a snippet. Pretty good, right? Day 3. On day 3, the first thing I did was finish the tile set for both halves of the mask section. Then I drew out the map for them in Godot. Just like with the previous areas, there was a lot of back and forth between my drawing app and Godot, as I made lots of little changes to make sure everything looked good. Along with that, I also designed these 2 statue versions. The first being an NPC the player would be able to talk to, and the other being a destroyed version. Basically, the mask section is split into 2 areas, the heavenly cloud area and the sewers. This broken version of the statue was meant to litter the waters and floors of the sewers, but I completely forgot to add them until one of the final days. Next, I added in all the assets and began writing the dialogue for the cloudy area. In this area, there is a word puzzle that requires you to talk to all the NPCs and try to guess a 4-letter word based on the hints they give. Very dialogue heavy. I did my best to make every NPC have unique dialogue that wouldn't be too long, so the player wouldn't get too bored reading through it all. There were a few bugs related to this, but Atsh was able to fix them. Next was the sewer part of the map. Atsh came up with a really cool mechanic for this that requires the player to click at the right moment to attack the monsters, which is the puzzle for that area. It was quite cool to see, especially once I finished the visuals for it. But anyway, I drew up the map for the sewers, adjusting the tile set along the way. Once I was done with that, I added in all the dialogue for it. That was also a bit complicated, but not as much as previous areas. Also, it was quite enjoyable to write the masked man's dialogue. Then I tested everything, sending any bugs I found to Atsh to fix. Day 4. At this point, we were officially halfway through the game jam and on track to finish a day early, maybe earlier. Just like with all the previous sections, I drew up the tile set for the eye section, aka the maze and mirror areas. For the maze part, we were at first thinking of doing a procedurally generated map. That just means that the layout of the maze is random for every playthrough. But that would have likely proved to be a bit too difficult to code, so we decided to instead have a bunch of pre-made rooms that the player has to go through. Each room would have 4 directions the player could go through. Going in the wrong direction puts them back in the beginning, and going in the correct one would progress them. Finishing up the tile set, I designed the maze and mirror area tile map. I liked what I had for the maze, but I admit the mirror area was rather boring. However, I needed to focus on finishing everything else. I finished up all the other assets for these levels and pushed them to the main project. And while I waited for Atsh to finish up all the functionality for both areas, I designed the other 2 monsters the player meets. The first is the monster for the mirror map, the Eye Woman. Similarly to the masked man, I studied my mood board for her first. This image in particular was the original inspiration for her, but I took inspiration from a little of everything here. From the speed paint, you can see that I first gave her a head with just a big eye on it, but I didn't like how humanoid it looked. Also, it just made her look like a cyclops, so I tried making her head the eye, but I wasn't sure which one was better. I asked a few people, including my teammates, and they all agreed that the second version was better, so I went with that. I also gave her a halo of eyes around her main eye. That wasn't enough though, I needed more eyes. So for any part of her skin that was showing, I just added more eyes. What can I say? Eyes are pretty cool. As for her clothes, I once again took inspiration from post-Victorian fashion and used purple again. I admit I am biased towards my favorite color, but it just looks so nice. And it fits with the theme of the place she inhabits. The second character represents death itself, a Grim Reaper if you will. Her design leans further from post-Victorian influences, but that's fine because she's more so inspired by an important Greek figure. The Fates in Greek mythology are 3 women who wield thread and scissors. By cutting these threads, they can end the life of a person. One of them has the name Atropos, which also has connections to the method used to kill Bella. Again, no spoilers. Because of her influence, I gave her a lot of drapey clothing and drew her holding red strings. Her color scheme is dark gray and red, and she wears a veil that shadows her face. I quite like her design, and I know a lot of others did too, so that's good. I created sprites for both, with the death monster having a full turnaround and an idle animation. She's the only monster that actively moves around, so she's the only one who needed it. This is because she has a little chase section where she'll need to be moving around. By then, Atsh had finished both the functionality for the maze and for the mirror area, and we had all decided to title the game Belladonna. The last thing I did was create the tile set for the final area, which didn't really require too many tiles, so it didn't take long. Days 5 and 6. These 2 days mostly consisted of finishing up the base game and adding some flair. Of course, I prioritized the final level first, drawing and implementing all the final assets, including the map for that area. Then I added in all the dialogue for the mirror area, the final area, and the endings. At this point, most of the necessary art was in the game except for the 2 ending graphics, so I set to work on those. Usually, when I participate in game jams and create full illustrations, I trace 3D models. It just makes it so much faster. I don't like tracing because I feel like too much of it will diminish my drawing ability, but a game jam is a time crunch. Meanwhile, Atsh added in the functionality for the rest of the levels and Pete added in a bunch more audio-related things. And with that, we were basically done, leaving the rest of the time for polish and flair. It's very rare in game jams that I have the time to bring it to the exact quality I originally imagined, so I was quite happy about this. The art that I made during these 2 days includes the title screen art, the art for the game page, and alternate expressions for all the characters. Also, Atsh suggested some changes for parts of the dialogue, so I made those changes as well. Finally, I played through everything to test and make a list of remaining things for me, Ash, and Pete to add or change on the final day. Day 7. Day 7 was a pretty busy day for me, despite us already being done with the base game. Both Ash and I had some people playtest the game and leave some critique. Most of such critique was related to the visuals and dialogue, which fall under my domain. I managed to implement most, if not all, of the critique offered. For the death monster area, I made the chase section much longer and harder, and added more rooms to the background. I think this makes the area a lot more intimidating and strange. For the mirror area, I created these flower trees to fill the mostly empty fields. I was glad because that area was easily the most boring to look at. In the sewers, I finally added the broken statue sprites I made in the beginning, as well as some goo and trash on the floors. Additionally, I made some minor visual changes, like making a new interaction icon and giving all the character sprites outlines. Then I drew 2 more illustrations and put them in the game, as some of our playtesters felt there should be more. I personally am not a huge fan of how these turned out, but at least I got them done. Meanwhile, Pete added the last of the sound effects and music, and Ash made a lot of changes. My favorite of these changes is probably the shader for the clouds and water to make them move. Also, since Ash is a few hours ahead of me and Pete, he was able to add in some final things while we were asleep and before it was officially time to submit. During this time, Ash created the title screen, tweaked some coding and engine-related things, added fog to one of the levels, and made quite a lot of changes to the mirror puzzle. During the day, we had decided to change the mirror puzzle last minute as the original version was way too easy. And that was it. Or at least I thought it was. But on the morning of the submission date, I woke up around 5 a.m., which was only an hour before the submission time. I was far too paranoid to just let it be, so I quickly checked to make sure that the game had actually been submitted. It had, but it wasn't showing up on my itch.io dashboard, and neither Pete nor I were listed as co-creators. It's a good thing I was able to catch it and let Ash know, as Ash was the original creator of the project on Itch, and the only one with the ability to fix it. Luckily, it was able to be fixed 15 minutes before 6 a.m. And with that, we were officially done. I'm quite proud of what we ended up with, and everyone who's played it so far has only had good things to say about it. Before this, I had never worked with anyone on any of my creative projects, but I wanted to challenge myself. I was honestly quite worried, mostly because I know I can be pretty stubborn and a bit of a perfectionist. I was worried I wouldn't be a good teammate, but I think I did pretty well. This was a wonderful experience, and I am very grateful that I was able to work with such great teammates. Without them, the game wouldn't nearly be as great as it ended up being. But why don't you tell me what you think? The game is called Belladonna, and I would love if you checked it out. It's free, short, and playable in your browser. Oh, and check out Pete and Ash's itch pages as well as Pete's YouTube, where he posts his music, including the Belladonna soundtrack. Links to all of those will be in the description. But anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already to see more of this kind of content. Take care and farewell.